Hello, everybody. It's me sitting in a hotel room, and I've had people ask about some of the specifics of my cancer. And since this is kind of an area that I've studied, I thought it would be fun to put together a lecture that's a pretty general lecture. So, those of you who are friends and colleagues that might want to dive a little deeper, at the very end, I've got like a reference list of the papers I plan on reading, but not what I've used to make this. Only a few papers were used to make this, and I'm sure that I've forgotten to include a reference here and there for this talk. But anywho, here we are, and this is my 10,000 foot view of extranodal NK T-cell lymphoma nasal type. And I guess before I begin, you might be wondering about this scarf. My neck and head have been hurting a lot, so I'm wearing a scarf in a flippin' hotel room because it is slightly comforting to my neck. And I didn't remember my other headset, so I'm wearing a gaming headset. Anyway, here we go. If this clicker will work. Of course, now it's not going to work or something. There we go. All right, so the way I have this little talk set up is just I want to clarify some terms, some of the things. My research was on the cell side and mechanisms, and it was a much smaller world. I didn't deal with patient stuff much. In fact, most of the papers I would read, I would kind of speed read through those parts. So it's not just for you guys, but for me too, kind of clarifying some of the terms that are used with cancer and what it means. And then I want to try to bring that back to what it means to my type of cancer. I've been asked about what does it mean that I have a rare form of cancer, so I want to address that with kind of this types and subtypes of cancer. Then I'm going to talk about specifically what are the cells in that are part of the cancer that I have, and then what are the treatments and what's the ultimate goal. So, I have a little glitch there. Had to fix my slide thing. It's being dumb. It's still not wanting to work. Love and tech right now. Okay, let's get into clarifying terms here. The first term is cancer. I have a lot of friends and family who talk about, curing cancer, or, some of the people I've met they've jumped into the conspiratorial side of things where the government has a cure for cancer, but it's been hidden from us. Well, let's just put this all to bed real quick. Cancer is a lot of diseases, but they all have one thing in common: uncontrolled cell growth. And so you can see here in this term, it's a term for multiple diseases where an abnormal cell divides without control and can invade other cells. So it'll go to other tissues and start uncontrollably growing there and replicating itself and take over those different organs. And that's the part we typically call metastasis. So ultimately, there are several main types of cancer, and I'm going to talk about those next as I get into the rarity of the kind that I have and into the specifics of what I have. We'll talk more about that. All right, stage. This is something, again, I kind of glossed over in a lot of my research because I mostly dealt with animals and cells, and so stage mattered to me only to the extent that the more advanced the stage was, if the treatments or the nutrients that I was looking at had a positive effect, that was better because it could be used further along and when the cancers may be harder to treat. So what does stage mean? So this is the extent of the cancer in the body. So it's not just the amount that you have, but also it's based on the size of the tumor, whether or not lymph nodes contain the cancer, whether or not the cancer spread to other organs and sites. So it's the level of symptoms in the in cancer. Now, pulling it to mine, my cancer, as you hone in on specific types of cancer, while there's a general staging for cancer, each of these very specific kinds will likely have their own modified staging process, looking at specific risk factors. So for me, because I was found on a weird fluke through this nasal thing where I had a numb tooth, and lo and behold, we found this tumor through a septoplasty surgery just so I could breathe better. We get this tumor pulled out. I was really healthy, and so I'm considered stage 1, and because the cancer hadn't spread from its original site, it got a little E after the 1, and because I literally show no other symptoms in any other parts of my body that I have cancer, I get what's called an A. So I'm stage 1 EA. Now, if I was running a fever, or if the tumor had spread even to a single secondary site, or if I had other mouth issues, there are multiple different symptoms that I could have that would have put me into stage 1B or possibly stage 2. I'm not going to go through the details of exactly how my cancer is staged, but what you need to know is I'm literally the lowest stage possible to have been diagnosed with this cancer. So much so, my doctors were literally said I'm the healthiest person they've ever seen with this type of cancer. So, and you'll hear me say this a lot, I feel extremely blessed. Despite having a cancer diagnosis, the way in which everything has played out, the support from everybody as well, I've never felt so blessed in my life. So blessed and so loved. So thank you for that. All right, continuing on. Remission. You'll hear people talk in cancer about remission. This is a decrease or disappearance of the signs and symptoms of cancer, which can be the tumor, which can be the side effects of the tumor. So in my case, if I were to gain all the feeling back in like all my teeth that I've lost feeling in, that would be one of the symptoms. I would regain that, and that would be a little bit of remission to the tumor or to the cancer. But so we have a couple different kinds here. We've got partial remission, so some, not all. That would be like a partial remission. Complete remission is all the signs and symptoms have disappeared. Now, this is really important. Someone can be in complete remission and still relapse and have cancer. And the reason is that when we say all signs and symptoms of cancer have disappeared, what we mean is to our ability to detect those signs and symptoms. There might be, and it sounds weird, but in a quite literal sense, a few, 10 cells, 20 cells that have escaped the primary site, gone somewhere else, and are not being detected, but those may start to grow and the cancer can come back. So that's what's called complete remission. But the cancer, again, might still be in the body. There is one other thing here, which is called curative treatment, and certain cancers fall into the category of actually having a cure. And when we say a cure, we don't mean there's a single pill or maybe even a single method to get rid of the cancer. What we mean is that cancer is curable when done correctly and removed correctly. That person has the highest chance of never having cancer again. So when you look here at the definition, it's defined as a proportion of patients who survive beyond the time at which the risk of treatment failure approaches 0. That is a lot in a statement. So just bear with me here. If time is on the Y here, or the X, excuse me, if time is down here, the further away from treatment we get, we want to see no more cancer. So 0 cancer. We want to get closer and closer to 0. the further we get, the closer we get to zero. We may never touch zero, but we're getting closer and closer. What they're saying is that curative treatment is this group of people who fit into a set of criteria that it's pretty well guaranteed they're going to hit this real far area where the chances of relapse are about zero. It's so close to zero, they're willing to say zero. How does this relate to me? I fit that category. Once again, huge blessing. It is from what I've read, it's about a 77% of patients, so I fall into a good chunk of patients, end up in this curative group. So that's a big positive. So we're pushing for curing me to not ever deal with this again. All right, so I talked about cancer. Just because I'm a geek and I like to talk about cancer, I said, uncontrolled cell death, and staging happens through multiple other things. Well, some of those other things are what the cells will develop themselves, signals that show up on the cancer cells, again, how it spreads, how many cells, how big the tumor is, multiple things. But some of these other features of the cancer cells are, we refer to these as the hallmarks of cancer. So if you're wondering what some of those are, this is from a paper, and it looks like I forgot to cite it. But if you just search the hallmarks of cancer on Google, you will absolutely find this. Right now, for whatever reason, I'm blanking on the authors' names, but I've cited it so many times, I'm a little mad at myself that I can't remember. Anyway, you have genome instability and mutation. That one is one that most people know. The proliferative signals and constant growth. A lot of these play into that constant cell growth, but if you read some of these, they are more specific and they help in that constant growth. Like, let's see, what's a good one? Inducing angiogenesis. So this is these tumor cells actually help form more blood vessels in the tumor, which allows the tumor to get more nutrients easier. So it's a good thing for the tumor to do that, bad for us as the host. So these are, again, the hallmarks of cancer. All right, so now let's get into a bit more of the types, and I'll describe exactly what type of cancer I have. Again, I already told you it's a lymphoma, but in case you were curious, there are like 5 main kind of facets of cancer: carcinoma, sarcoma, leukemia, central nervous system cancers, also referred to as malignancies, and then we have lymphoma and multiple myelomas. Again, this talk is way too text heavy in general for me, and I don't like it, but I want to get it out more than I want to take the time to make it perfect, because that does take a while. So if you want to read these, great. I apologize that I didn't have like a good image for each one, like some skin and some bone and cartilage for sarcoma, and leukemia showing some blood. Like, that's what I'd normally do, but it's already been 4 weeks. Like, I want you guys to know this stuff and to be able to do this. So again, I have lymphoma, which is cancers that belong to the cells of the immune system. And yes, the irony has not been lost on me that I studied nutrition within cancer immunology, and I have a cancer of an immune cell. Fitting. All right, so there's some papers that do projections for how many people they think are going to get cancer in the next year. I was able to find that for this current year, and there's around 1.9 million potential new cases, which you can see up here, that are supposed to happen this year, and this is for the United States. Of those 1.9 million, there will be 90,000 that will be lymphomas. So around 5% of all the new cancers this year are going to be lymphomas. But of that 5%, that gets divided to the Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphomas. Hodgkin's lymphomas only amount to about 0.5% of all cancers, which is good. Nobody should get Hodgkin's lymphoma, but bad in the sense that, according to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, it's one of the most curable forms of cancer. So it's kind of a bummer that one of the most curable forms happens to be one that's not going to affect too many people. On the other hand, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma makes up the majority of that 4.8%, with 81,000 being non-Hodgkin's lymphomas, which is where I fall. So now I ran into some problems finding more specifics on the percents that would be expected for types of non-Hodgkin's lymphomas. So you can see here that based on the numbers for 2021, it's around 4.3% of non-Hodgkin's lymphomas, where in 2016 it was 4.8. So take these numbers with a grain of salt, but here's how I did it. I took the numbers, yada yada. You can see from the American Cancer Society, there's links below. If you're a number Nazi and you want to show me what the numbers should have been, go ahead. This is just kind of rough estimates, quick, so people can get an idea of what rare means. So of non-Hodgkin's lymphomas, in 2016, it was 4.1% were of a cell called the B cells, where T and NK cell types only accounted for 0.3% of non-Hodgkin's, and other types 0.1%. Now, within the T and NK cell types, the specific extranodal NKT cell lymphoma that I have, the nasal type, is actually ends up being, when I again do the math to get a value for what would be this year, it comes out to about 112 people, or 0.01% of all the cases. So just think about that. That right there is the chances of getting the cancer that I have, not accounting for the fact that I am of European descent and white, and that makes it also strange, which I wasn't going to do those numbers. But primarily this cancer affects those of Asian descent. I'll talk more about that in a bit. So this is what we mean by rare, and why for a long time I've always been a supporter and want you guys to be supporters too of the other cancers. The pink ribbon stuff has done wonders for breast cancer, and you'll hear me speak kind of negatively about that. I don't mean it to be negative towards anyone with breast cancer or breast cancer survivors. What's frustrating is so many companies and so many people getting involved in a single type of cancer, when we should have green ribbon and all the other ribbons, because these people need funding too. The research has to continue with these types of cancers as well. People with these cancers also need support and help, and the only way to do that is by us all becoming advocates for others to know that, hey, go donate to these societies that are helping do research and helping patients pay these exorbitant medical bills to get treated for cancer. And at the very end, I'm going to talk a little bit more on that. But now I'm going to change topics and again talked about the rarity. So for those of you who don't know much about immunology, what are NK cells? Where do they fall? And I just want to give a little bit of background with the immune system, a little bit on cancer, and then kind of that interaction between cancer and the immune system. This has less to do with my specific type of cancer and more just I like talking about this stuff. So there you go. If you want to fast forward, go ahead. Okay, so the immune system in cancer. First, let's start with the immune system. The majority of our immune cells come from our bone marrow. So when you go in and you get blood drawn and they look at your counts, you'll have white blood cell count. That's kind of counting all of the immune cells. And these are all the immune cells in circulation, which all come from your bone marrow. Now, once the main cell that makes all these is called the hematopoietic stem cell. There won't be a quiz. It then divides out and it creates these progenitor cells, either of a myeloid type of cell or a lymphoid type of cell. And each one of these kind of gives rise to the rest of our immune system. And you'll see here that the myeloid progenitor primarily gives rise to our red blood cells, our platelets, but then on the immune system itself, it gives us our neutrophils, which you'll see on a blood cell count. You'll probably see, if you pay attention, you'll see actually most of these names, although I think often basophils aren't included, but you'll see macrophages, dendritic cells, and neutrophils and eosinophils are the main ones that you see. Now notice this guy in this weird little pocket here. I'm trying to get my mouse to work. Right here, called the natural killer cell. This is that NK cell that my cancer formed from. Well, it actually belongs to what's called the lymphoid, or it's a lymph cell. And those are what make our T and B cells. So when people talk about vaccines and having memory against viruses and stuff, that's this group of cells. These are the assassins of the immune system. They are very specific on what they kill, and they're very, very good at it. Now, I'm not going to go into details about how they do all that, but you should know that the T cells are, like I said, they're very much the assassin. They like to get their hands dirty. They go and find the cell and kill it. The B cells, they release the antibodies. They're the ones releasing all of those into your body. But again, very targeted antibodies. They only should be attacking a single thing. Now, we've got innate on one side, adaptive on the other. The innate is our first line of defense. They're not specific. They just, basically, it's a go, no-go type of a thing. If you're a basketball fan, this is like zone defense. Nobody gets a specific person. They're just out saying, are you self? No, you're not self. I will kill you. Oh, you're self? I don't want to kill you. And what's interesting about the natural killer cell is it's part of the targeting family, that assassin family, but it's unspecific like these other cells. So it's kind of floating around, but it's very good at honing in on something and killing it with that self, not self kind of signaling. So it's a very aggressive type of cell, which leads to, and we'll talk more about it later, why this type of cancer that I have is considered aggressive. There's a lot of killing involved because these cells are really good at killing things. All right, so now let's jump over to the other side. How does cancer form? Again, if you've seen this stuff a million times, please fast forward, because again, 10,000 foot view. If you don't really understand or are curious, I'm going to take a couple seconds. Just, this is how cancer forms. In this example, I'm using prostate cancer because it's got a nice has a nice progression that's easy to see visually. But we'll do this as an immune system at the immune cell at the end. So we get some sort of cell that are typically some sort of tissue cell. Often it's a tissue-specific epithelial cell, in this case, a prostate cell. Something will happen, and while there is diet, lifestyle choices, chemical exposure, radiation, ultimately it's these things out here affecting the genetics, causing mutation, which lead to the first step, which is a prosthetic neoplasia. It's this first what's called prosthetic intraepithelial neoplasia, or PIN. So this is like our just a step out of our benign tumor. That then will proceed to an adenocarcinoma, where here it's fairly contained. We're beginning to see the tumor at this point, where before it might look different in the tissue itself, but it's not causing a large rupture or bulge in our tissue. Once we get to the adenocarcinoma, we're actually growing outside the normal tissue barriers, and it's going to look like a tumor. And then the final step is metastasis, where that growth then bursts and spreads those tumor cells to other places in the body. Now, the big difference between this and a lymphoma is typically, instead of it being an epithelial cell itself, we have an immune cell. So let's just say there's a cell right where my pointer's at here that will bind to one of these epithelial cells, and that's what's going to build the tumor, is that we have a cancerous immune cell that's recognized some epithelial cell and it's starting to destroy that area. At the same time, it's massively replicating, and they all start binding together and we get the tumor formation. But then it follows a very similar pattern. It'll be somewhat contained at the tumor stage, and at metastasis that will burst and spread. Again, bringing it back to what happened with me, we were able to find the tumor before it burst and went metastatic and got to my lymph node or into my circulation and spread. We did lots of scans on me to confirm this. My spine was clear, my brain was clear, my other lymph nodes were clear, and the other major places where this cancer tends to spread to were all clear. So again, big blessings in a crappy situation. And keep in mind, what I just explained on the formation of cancer is without much complexity. I'm keeping this to the bare minimum. The reality is that there's immune cells the entire time. Immune cells recognize cells that are mutated or aren't our own. They're infected with something. So when you think about it, a cancerous cell of any type should get recognized as, hey, you've got a problem. I need to kill you. That's what our immune system should be doing, is saying, you don't look healthy, you need to go away. But something happens in that process, and that's called, there's a theory called immunoediting, and I love this theory. Again, I forgot the citation. So again, if you just search immunoediting, you will find this paper. I've cited it enough times. I should know this author by heart, and his name is escaping me. Like I said, I want to get this lecture, or talk, lecture, whatever. I want to get this out to you guys, so I'm not going to take the time to go find that. Maybe, when I go to post this on Caring Bridge, I'll try and make sure to get the hallmarks and this citation put into that. All right, at the top here. You have, again, your normal cell, whether it's an immune cell or an epithelial cell, has some weird stuff happen, causing mutations into some specific genes that leads to cancer. Now, what should happen with the immune system is the immune system should recognize that these cells are not us anymore, they're problem cells, and they should attack and hopefully remove them and cause this form of protection. But what often happens is these cells can only kill at the same rate that the tumor cells are actually replicating. So you get this equilibrium, like the immune cell kills one, the cancer cells replicate a new one. And what's real problematic is when this is happening, there's what's called selective pressure, where there's a lot of signals from the immune system that's actually leading to mutations, new mutations in the cancer cells, and that ultimately leads to what's called immune escape, which is one of the main things that I studied as a graduate student. And you'll see here that NK cells actually they're an important cell in clearing out tumor cells. So the fact that I have an important clearing cell, tumor clearing cell as my tumor, you can see how this is problematic for the whole immune system. One of my main defenders is the problem. And so another reason and thing that makes this kind of a pretty crappy cancer. So now we've talked about the immune system. I want to just give some highlights, and this is totally like an information dump about extranodal NK T-cell lymphoma. Its old name was called lethal midline granuloma, and I talked about how these cells kill things. And well, here it is. It was called this because of the necrotic lesions in the nasal cavity that would happen due to the aggressive nature of these NK cells and their killing. I'm really glad the name changed because that sounds really bad. And 20 years ago, before they really understood this cancer, they were only finding it in much higher stages, stage 3 and 4, and it really had poor prognosis. So again, unbelievably thankful and blessed to be at 2021 where there is good treatment and we caught it so early. For those of you wanting mechanism and how does this virus or how does this cancer form, what causes it, we don't fully know, but here's what we do know is primarily it's found in East Asian countries, Mid and South America, and it's highly correlated with Epstein-Barr virus. So regions where the EBV is really common, again, East Asia countries in South America. And Epstein-Barr virus is the human herpes virus 4, which is known for mono, which is crazy because to my knowledge, I've never been diagnosed with mono. But I have, reading about this virus and everything, anymore, it is very difficult to find a person who doesn't have some level of EBV in their system. So it's a very, very common virus that unfortunately most of the human race has. But the level and what the viral load, so probably because of COVID, most of you have heard of this phrase, viral load. The amount that you have is correlated with the potential to get ENKTL. So apparently, I must have at some point had a high load, and that may have triggered the NK cells. It was the straw that broke their back, so to speak, in my nasal cavity, and they went cancerous. The exact pathway that goes through isn't as known, though. This type of cancer usually affects individuals aged about 40 to 50 years old, and they, depending on the paper you read, it'll say without gender predilection, or it'll say with slightly more with men. So, it's probably like 51-49 men to women sort of a thing, and I am like at the edge, which is frustrating on the age for when to get this, but whatever. This type is the most common type, the nasal kind, and so while I have a rare cancer, I have the common type of the rare cancer, which again helps because it puts me into that curable group. There are 2 or 3 other forms of ENKTL that are more aggressive than mine and much harder, and they're not curative. One of them is absolutely not curative. The hope is that you go remission. So again, I feel so blessed to have gotten the common form of this cancer. I know it's weird, but hopefully you understand that. It is referred to as aggressive, mostly due to its ability to cause necrotic lesions and the amount how fast it grows, which I can attest to its speed in growth. Not to get overly graphic, but prior to my diagnosis, I could feel the tumor in there, and using the saline washes, not the spray kind, but the force it up your nose kind, I actually broke off pieces of the tumor 3 times. And so I was getting chunks of tumor out of my nose, which that's a whole different sensation and wake up call. Anyway, so it does grow really fast, and I felt maybe it was totally psychosomatic, but I felt like I would get relief for a few days after a piece would break off, but only for a few days, and then I would feel like that was back, like the same amount of pressure had returned and blockage had returned in my sinus area. So again, I already said this, the full pathway is unknown for the geeks in the room and nerds in the room. This is the DOI for the paper that this came from, and this talks about all of the major signaling molecules and pathways that we know are part of ENKTL development. And you can see here which pathways within this type of cancer are activated for different hallmarks. It's a pretty interesting paper, but I think it's way too much into the weeds for this talk, and so I just kind of quickly perused through the paper. I really liked that graph, and there we go. So we do know some about this cancer, just not as much as we know about quite a few other cancers. All right, so pause before I get to probably the real short part of this talk, what they're doing with me and treatment and whatnot. Here we go, summary. My cancer is called extranodal NK, or natural killer T-cell lymphoma. It's the nasal type. It's really rare, meaning that less or around 0.01% of all the cancers for 2021 will be this type. It's aggressive, meaning it grows really fast, and because of the immune cell, it causes necrotic lesions, so it's killing cells in my nasal cavity and my sinuses. And again, this other point is it's a lymphatic immune cell called the natural killer cell. All right, so now moving on, how are the doctors treating this and what's their goal? And like I said, I'm going to probably go pretty fast through this in comparison to what I just did. So the treatments, there's multiple regimes, and I thought about putting them all in here, but it would probably bore to tears everyone because it's all kind of the same stuff, different levels, slight changes. So here it is in summary. With radiation by itself has a really poor prognosis, so they don't typically recommend or do only radiation for this type of cancer. It is almost always combined with chemo, whether that's staggered, so you go chemo, radiation, chemo, or radiation, chemo, radiation. Or you do it together, like what I'm doing, where I have radiation for 5 weeks and literally just chemo stacked on those 5 weeks, and then my last chemo will be past the 5 weeks and it'll be by itself, but the radiation portion will be done. And again, no radiation is also avoided because it also leads to poor prognosis. With chemotherapy, there are multiple different regimes to treat this type of cancer, but really there were only 2 that they thought of doing for me, and they are the most recommended by the national, I've forgotten the name, the group that decides all the treatments that the oncologists look at. All right, this is going to bug me. Doing a talk and I can't remember the exact name of something. I don't accept. National Comprehensive Cancer Network. There we go. I was given basically what the oncologists look at. They printed it off for me so that I could read a ton. It was so awesome. These guys, they're amazing. Anyway, so we have what's called DVIC and SMILE as the 2 regimes. So we have dexamethasone, which is just a steroid, and that just helps reduce inflammation and kind of keeps me up while I get beat up by these other 3 drugs, which is etoposide. This other one I pronounce really horribly, ifosfamide, and carboplatin. That's the one I'm using. It's 3 days of chemotherapy where I'm getting IV doses of these drugs. Some of them are over, one of them's only a half an hour that it takes for me to take the whole dose, while another one of those is over 4 hours. And then I have to take another drug for side effects. Anyway, So it's more drugs than that, but those are the chemotherapy drugs and the testosterone, or not testosterone, the steroid, and that's what gives it the name Divic. Smile, on the other hand, is 10 days of chemotherapy, so it's 2 weeks that you take these drugs, and it's a lot more intensive. It does a lot more to your body as far as side effects, and that was the original plan, was to do what's called Smile and follow that regime and that plan for me. But the doctors at MD Anderson and my medical oncologist have used Divic before, and currently it is the standard treatment when you're a stage 1 and fit that criteria for cure. And so very happy to have a regime that's a bit lower intensity. And I say lower intensity, like these drugs are no joke. They mess you up. It's not pleasant. And then finally, again, this is a rare cancer, so they do recommend that all of us who have it and are being treated find a clinical trial. But think about it. Think about this. In all of America, if only 200 people, it's round way up, if 200 people have this cancer, how do I get a clinical trial that's going to matter as a scientist? How do I even find those people? That's 200 people in the whole year. So it's hard. So what I've done at this point is I reached out to my nurse and my oncologist and told them, whatever fluids, any samples that they can use for science, I want to give. And they are looking into that, but they're looking into it and my own looking into it. There's not a lot going on in the U.S. because, again, it's really rare here. The most research for these cancers is in Asia and South America. So I'll keep everybody posted. If they end up being able to ship my blood somewhere, that'd be cool. I'd like to support researchers any way that I can. But there's that. In these clinical trials, though, they are utilizing what's called immunotherapies. While I've been at the hotels and the hospital, I've been watching commercials. So you've probably seen some of these commercials for what's called checkpoint inhibitors. These are a very special kind of drug that still is in clinical trials for different types of cancer, and for this cancer appear to work. Now, they're not going to treat me or low stage with these because the checkpoint inhibitors are a pretty hard hammer when it comes to therapies. And I don't want to say that we shouldn't use those right away, but when we've kind of exhausted all the other options, we want to make sure we still have something in our back pocket as researchers and the oncology world. And that's where the immunotherapies are, these amazing, very powerful, big hammers that we can smash cancer with. But the community is still holding them back a little bit because we really don't want cancer to become immune to these newest immunotherapies, because we really don't know what to do after that. If cancer escapes these things, we got another decade of work ahead of us before we can really work on those. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. So I'm happy though that there are checkpoint inhibitor trials going on and that they've been showing good signs of success. So again, if I were to relapse, I might qualify at that point for one of these. Hoping that doesn't happen though, because that would be a dumb thing just so I could take a cool drug. Anyway, so I don't know about you, but for the long time I had no idea what any of this meant. Like, what does radiation do? How does radiation actually hurt tumors or cancer cells? What does chemotherapy drugs do? So real quick, radiation is very targeted. When you go into the dentist, it's a fairly broad x-ray that they hit you with so that they can get a larger picture. With radiation treatment, it's super narrow, and they actually have biophysicists who do the math so that they can be super exact. Now, there's still some drift. There's still a little on the excess of the beam where we are hurting some of my good cells, but way more directed than anything else you'll ever be exposed to. But what its goal is to go into the cells and to break up the tumor cell's DNA so that it can't replicate anymore. By stopping it from being able to replicate, hopefully between the chemotherapy and our immune system and just nature in general, its life cycle will end, or it will accumulate so many mutations that it'll undergo self-death called apoptosis, and it dies. So this is a really important thing. The chemotherapy, on the other hand, the drugs that I'm taking, and that's my little NK cell down there, born to kill. It's from a company called BioLegend that I really, really love. Anyway, from what I found, these all bind to different regions of DNA inside cells and stop cellular replication. So these are kind of doing the same thing, but in a different way. They're stopping the cells from replicating and causing cell death. Now, I personally have a hard time buying that these drugs' mode of action is only inhibiting DNA replication. I don't buy it. I didn't look deeply into how these drugs work beyond that. So for everybody here, I'm saying that's what they do because the most surface level understanding of what the drugs do is they inhibit cell replication by binding to DNA and stopping the DNA from being able to be replicated. So that's essentially what we're doing with chemotherapy, for me at least, and the radiation, is we're stopping the tumor cells from being able to be replicated or to continue self-replication. So final summary, putting all this into the shortest form possible, I have a rare, quote-unquote, aggressive cancer in an immune cell, but I'm really low stage. I'm healthy. Fit might be an overstatement. COVID has added a few pounds. Maybe a few is an understatement, 20-ish. But because of all that, I fall into a curable group, which has me very hopeful and happy, so to speak. So I say we in the bigger sense, not just me or not just my oncologist, but we, all of us, we are pushing for me to be cured, not to be into partial or even, quote, complete remission. We want cure. I want to hit that way past life expectancy group. All right, final note for the talk. I said it before. This has always been something I've believed in, and now I have a reason to act on that belief. Again, pink ribbons have done an amazing thing for breast cancer awareness. There's so many walks, and products get what we call pink washed. There's just so much stuff and so much support for women going through breast cancer, and I appreciate it and I love it. What's difficult, though, as somebody who's studied cancer, who's seen rare cancers take friends of mine or parents of my friends, it's tough to see pink ribbons everywhere and not the ribbon that they have. So I'm asking all of you I don't know where to buy. I didn't want to buy, and I don't want you buying some cheap, crappy Chinese green ribbon. What I want more is when people talk or when you're out talking, make sure they're aware of places like the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. that when they're talking about needing a place to donate to help with things, there are alternatives to buying pink washed items at the store. Buy your normal groceries and maybe put some money towards one of these cancer groups. And it doesn't have to be LLS. Pancreatic cancer is really, it's not very, it's also a rare type of cancer. There's not much research on it, and it's a death sentence. Like, I want to see us supporting as a community more of these cancers, more research for them, and supporting the families who are struggling and going through it, because there's just not as many resources for them. So what I've done to kind of make myself, I guess, feel better, or I want to donate $5,000 to LLS through you guys, and hopefully my next work check, I can take a percentage of that and put money into my own charity, put my own money where my mouth is. These people are doing a ton for me and my family right now, and I want to make sure I give back, and I don't want to forget what they've done for me, and I want to help do that for other people. So please, if you can, thank you for supporting me as an individual, but please don't stop there. Go to one of these places and help others who, you guys are an amazing community for me. I know there are people going through this that don't have that. That makes me sad. So thank you. I love all you guys, especially all of you who watched and listened to this entire thing. Sorry about turning into a little commercial at the end there. I felt like I became an infomercial. But I really do feel like we just need to be doing more for the cancers that we don't see the ribbons everywhere. We don't see the funding being plastered on billboards everywhere, So I want to do my part. Let's all get the information out there. Leukemia Lymphoma societies or other societies, if you know of them, please put them in the comments below this post, so that everybody can see where else we can support cancer survivorship, cancer research, for the rarer types of cancer. Remember, lymphomas only account for 5% of all the cancers that'll be diagnosed. So maybe let's go back to that list and look at those that are under the 10% mark. Like, how can we support these people who don't have the big communities that breast cancer and lung cancer and some of these others do? Again, I love you all so much. Thank you for listening to my rant on that. And I wasn't kidding. For the nerds, there it is. That is my current EndNote list, is what I've got. These are the papers that I found, and I am excited to read about. One of these actually has a data set on PubMed, so I'm super excited to do a little bioinformatics digging in here, and see if there's anything I can do on the research side of things to help with this cancer. But any questions, comments you have about this talk, happy to continue the conversation in the comment section. I can't say it enough. I love you guys, and thank you so much for the support and the comments you're giving me on my Caring Bridge. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined so many people coming and reading my weird rants. So thanks a bunch, and hopefully we'll get to talk, and I'll get to see you guys in person again soon. Thanks a bunch.